It's not funny. Um, okay, sure. Um, all right. This one is probably the one topic that I think has the least to do with. This one doesn't have any particular lesson to do with teamwork. Like a lot of these kind of have like lessons that you take away from it. This one's more actually just like a talking about what teamwork looked like in a particular thing. Because again, I spent a lot of time mainly dealing with teamwork in these environments. So every 2 years typically, 2019, 17, 15, 13, 11, 9, 7, all that, all the way back till 1995 or something around then. Every single 2 years, there's a whole bunch of teams that, about 40 of them, that fly to Australia from around the world, and they bring solar cars. And what they do is they race them from Darwin to Adelaide, typically. So it's about 3,000 kilometers through the middle of the desert. There's really nothing in the desert. Really, like it's excessively empty. Um, so you go from Darwin and you go all the way down the Stewart Highway all the way down into Adelaide, basically. So that's the route across Australia. It's about 3,000 kilometers. I think it's like 3,006 kilometers or something from memory. And yeah, we do that, and it takes us about 6 days. And the purpose of that race is essentially to drive there as efficiently as possible. Is the main part of it. Is Australia just a big desert? Well, here's how you can tell how populated an area is. You just grab a little Street View person, and this will tell you a lot, right? You can see how barren most of the country is. And you can see how dense the entire east and southeast coast is. And this is very different if you go to like the USA, right? Like if you go to the USA and you go to like what you think looks like the desert, like say the Midwest areas, and you drag this little person over, you'll see there's actually just like people everywhere, particularly in like these areas, right? Like the US is like a crazy place. The kind of ironic thing about Australia is like as outbacky as it is or whatever, pretty much no one in Australia doesn't really live in the cities. Because like everyone pretty much just clumps in the cities, and like no one really lives not there. So anyway, we drive, typically teams of about 40 or 50 drive from Darwin to Adelaide. And the way we drive on the road, I guess, is particularly interesting because you drive as a fleet of cars, right? You don't just have a single solar car, driving down the road by itself like that, getting sunlight. You actually drive in a fleet. And the fleet of cars is pretty straightforward. You have I'll just draw some out here for you. Just kind of showing you what I guess, I don't know, teamwork look like in this context. This changes every year because of like different other things, but so typically the way we would run these races is that we would have a series of cars, and we had, I think, both races I ran, we called this one, I don't know, we called this one Tail, but yeah, we had like a bunch of different cars, and I'll show you the spacings between the cars. So this was typically like 1 kilometer, this was probably like 100 meters, this was probably like 4 kilometers, and this was probably like 2 kilometers. And basically this is what like the UNSW team and many other teams kind of had similar things. So you'd have each of these cars would typically have, like 6 people in them, right? This team would have 6 people. This car would have like, 5 people. This car would have like 6 people. The solar car would have like 4 people. This car would have like 7, and this car would have like 5 or something, right? So there's like pretty full cars of people. This is like the whole team essentially. And you'd be driving along, and you would be trying to basically navigate on these roads. And it was very tricky because like the amount of, I guess, coordination and trust you have to develop, which I guess is the very limited part this has to do with teamwork, largely stems from the fact that the solar car firstly can't see anything but going forward. So when you're telling it to overtake on a road, it's kind of scary because you can't actually see anything. And I'm going to try and find you a video that I have of us trying to attempt an overtake. This will probably run a few minutes past 12, but not by a ton. I just want to give you a sense of the road. So like typically while I'm looking this up, the scouts, the scout car's job is basically to go way ahead and make sure that nothing crazy is happening ahead. You know, is there any crazy weather storms? Is there any crazy car accidents, like things that could, you know, kind of slow us down or you know, ruin us? And if there are some crazy things ahead, they will come back and let us know. Similarly, they also actually have a job of doing things like picking up roadkill off the roads. There's a lot of dead kangaroos out in the desert. So they'll be responsible for picking up dead kangaroos in the desert, making sure that they're off the road so that the solar car doesn't run over them. Picking up other debris, stuff like that. The lead car's main job is to navigate, so it kind of gives the solar car directions on the road. I know you think, like, what is there to navigate? But there's a lot of things like potholes on the road or other, you know, kangaroos that die sometime, like after the scout car has passed, but before the lead car has passed. The lead car also has a lot of mechanical, electrical equipment in it. And then you have the solar car and control car, which are kind of paired together. And the control car is essentially where you have a lot of your telemetry, you know, people that are doing all the math. A lot of the lead engineers are there trying to keep an eye on things. And really this is like where the race happens, is in these three cars, because this is where all the action is. It's where usually your most capable people are. And then the trailer is literally just the actual ute with the trailer attached to it. And it's mainly just a whole bunch of storage. And then the tail car is kind of like a spare car that does a few odd jobs. Like sometimes if there's like not much petrol at a petrol station, it flies further ahead and picks up some extra petrol or something like that. Does the tail car put debris down to slow other teams? Yeah, that was a joke we used to have, which was scouts' jobs to pick up kangaroos off the road, and the tail car's job is to put them back on the road. Someone's asked, how fast does the solar car drive on average? During the race, not super fast, maybe like 70 kilometers an hour or something like that. I think the fastest we've ever gotten, the last car that's built, if you've seen the car around campus, this one, the fastest it's gone is 132. And funnily enough, for literally no particular reason, I was driving it at the time. So that's how I know. It's quite funny. We were actually going down a giant hill, and the car was speeding up quite a lot. And I was really scared to brake, because the thing about these cars is they're really fragile. So I was kind of more worried about hitting the brakes at 130 kilometers an hour than I was about doing 130 kilometers an hour. It's on a road somewhere. I'm just trying to find a video that's interesting. I was kind of worried you'd all pick this, because this one is relatively unstructured. But I think I can find a video. Give me one moment. It'll show you some of the overtaking chaos. These videos haven't been seen before. They're kind of a bit how you doing in terms of like yeah, sure, here we go. So I'll show you some of the examples of like why I have fond memories of like what SunSwift was back in the day for me. I don't know what it's like these days. It's an unlisted video, which I'm probably going to have to make private after this lecture, sadly. Probably, actually, I should do that right now. Even though it's like, you know, visible in the lecture or whatever. It's not like super dodgy. It's actually like totally fine. I just don't, you know. Anyway, so like this is an example of a bad overtake, right? So we had a new person driving the control car. So what you can actually see here is that traffic's moving really slowly, and when you overtake another fleet, right, it's really tricky because you've got these 6 cars on the road and you need to get all of your 6 cars in front of their 6 cars. So typically what you do is when you come up to their fleet, which is made up of like all their, like, so here's an example. You'll hear on the radio from Scout, and Scout will say, hey, we've noticed that there's a whole bunch of cars up ahead. It's really slow. So what happens is we know that there's like a whole fleet of cars up ahead, all bunched up here. So basically what happens is that the lead car it shoots ahead of all of those, like shoots way ahead of all those cars, and then it helps us call traffic and understand what traffic's ahead so that we don't kill someone, while we try and move like our cars in front of it. In particular, the solar car, which is the one that matters, right? Everything on the road is in service to the solar car. So in this case, I'm in the very back of this car at the moment, and we had a junior guy driving the car, and there was a terrible decision to overtake here. Like, it was a stupid decision, and what was happening here is that they're trying to overtake this fleet of cars in front. There's like zero space to actually pull into these cars. We're driving in oncoming traffic right now, by the way. So this is like a 110 kilometer an hour highway in the Northern Territory up north, trying to overtake these cars. And someone's also radioing that there's cars coming in the opposite direction. So, yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, this is all pretty similar to that. In the end, they had to kind of panic and pull back in front of this van, which it all is all very I mean, there are many teams that do like horrifically more dangerous things than this, and you might look at this and think, oh, well, like they missed this car by only like 5 or 6 seconds, which is like a lot of time to do something. But the problem is like you guys think about how barely you can get software built. Imagine how difficult it is to build like one of these cars, right? They're always kind of breaking. Like a wheel might fall off at any given time, or as I mentioned last week, you have the steering column of the car completely come off. Like, imagine if that car lost steering at that exact point. So I guess just the last one to show you then on this topic would just be which I'll find pretty quickly for you, is a video of so I went to South Africa in 2016, which I was very lucky. Well, I don't know why I would say I was lucky, but there was I'll show you another example of the challenges of overtaking. So this is me. I was an official, so I'm not part of a team in this video. I'm just putting it up on the screen. Sorry, it's really laggy. Ooh. Then we'll finish up. I know this is like really not boring, not fun. So this is a video. So I'm an official in this challenge here. This is in Africa, and this is a team trying to overtake the team I'm with. So you can see them trying to overtake here. This is just me filming, like having a good time. There's no sound attached, but I was expecting them to overtake. But like Africa was wild. Like all these teams trying to like navigate on the roads, and you'll see like again Africa's like a whole level of loose. I was expecting it to overtake here, and I looked back in the mirror and it was like still sitting behind. You can see all those cars banked up, right, and they're all trying to like scoot past. But there's a lot of dangerous things that happen. We're always kind of surprised that no one gets killed. UNSW, at least during the time I was there, had an extremely decent safety record compared to previous teams, the other teams in the challenges. But you'll see here and again these cars are all experimental. Sometimes they break. There's been ones that fly off the roads and fly into trees and everything of the sort. So yeah, bit of a nightmare. But the point is, it's good fun because everything you do matters, right? And like you actually have to learn to work with people that you don't like, because if you don't work with them well, then people die. That's like as simple as it is, because it's a giant challenging experience. And again, I'll just show you one 40-second one. Again, I'm sorry that this wasn't a very structured little talk. I guess it's more just talking about what it's like to drive a solar car on the road. But this is like in more industrial area around Darwin, for instance. So pretty much like, what does this 3,000 kilometer solar car race look like? It just looks like this. It looks like this. Our lead car is like up here. I think that might even be at the white car there. So you're in the city, so you're very close. Our scout car's well out of Darwin by this point. It left an hour ago. Our trailer cars and stuff are all floating behind us. Here's a car that's trying to struggle up the hill. So this solar car is pretty much fucked coming up the hill here. Its motors are just like dying. So they're going to be on the side of the road in a second, trying to figure that out. This is their lead car here. So you can see their lead car's pulled over and is basically like waiting to see what happens. And yeah, that's pretty much a lot of what you do for 3,000 kilometers. So it's pretty much like who can get to Darwin without breaking down and using the least energy, essentially. Yeah, it has a temporary road license. That's how it's road legal, essentially. There's nothing particularly like fancy about it. It's just like it gets a temporary license. And then I think, what's it like? There's like the main teams that crush everyone are the Dutch teams, because they have these they have so much money, like literally millions of dollars, and they just turn up with like these huge, massive teams with massive budgets and spare everything and this and that. The scariest things that happened on the 2017 race were how much would a car cost? I think Violet when last time I looked at the budget, I think this car cost about $500,000 from memory. So it's about $500,000 car. Most of it's the chassis. The body of this car, without like the motors and wheels in it, probably weighs like 120 kilos. It's extremely light. But in the 2017 race, so we did quite okay in the 2015 race. I did 2 races. The 2017 race we pulled out because we had some mechanical problems. So for instance, like to give you an example, on the first day we raced, we came out at Darwin and we had 2 major incidences. The first one is that we had the brake caliper fall off the front left wheel. So basically on your car, if you look behind the wheel, there's often this little red thing here. It's going to be smaller in your car because it's, probably not a sports car. And this fell off the car and got caught in the wheel, which caused it to kind of veer and nearly crash off the road. That one was extremely dangerous. That happened at about 80 kilometers an hour. It's not just the car coming off the road, it's also the fact that all of the people in the team surrounding it pull off the road very quickly, which causes potential hazards on the road with other cars. Later in the day, we had a tire explode, which sent the car off the road onto the grass, like flying through the grass. I think I was asleep during that one because I was in the control car because my job rotated between like running the fleet essentially in control, and I was working on the strategy team too. So we were like doing basically we wrote a lot of Python to figure out how fast the car should go. Yeah, I woke up and the car was off the road and dust was flying out everywhere and it was like bouncing around. And I remember I was talking to one of the guys in the car who said that, one of the passengers, who said it was so hot in the car that he was basically asleep and he would only get woken up when they crashed. So he'd basically sleep for 6 hours until the car crashed and then he'd like wake up. And then the third crash was the second day of the race. And that was where our rear, part of our double wishbone suspension broke off. So on the rear of the car, basically the wheel is held onto the car via like a structure that looks like a little bit like, I'm trying to find one that might be very visually easy to make sense of. Basically like one of these little rods here snapped. One of these little bits here, it just snapped off, and the left rear wheel basically just like went janky, and the car like kind of lost control and went off the road. So that happened at the end of the campsite, and then we pulled out that night. And that was one of probably the hardest memories I remember personally, because I wasn't quite running the team in 2017, but I was kind of like the de facto senior person there. So I just graduated, so I pretty much was just I just finished my 5th year of uni, and but like I was kind of like if the UNSW staff member died that was with us, then I'd probably be like the person that needs to figure stuff out, right? So that was a horrible night because we had to sit down as a team and figure out if we wanted to keep racing, and whether it was worth it, and whether the risk to people's lives was worth it, and the risk to the car was worth it. So yeah, good stuff. I mean, I think one thing I generally recommend for everyone, whoever you are, is spend some time of your life getting involved in something where decisions really have an impact on people in a real literal way, right? Like that's the weird thing about us being engineers, is that we have these things where we do little things to make huge impacts, right? Like we add a feature to a product, it has a little impact on everyone. It's a big impact, but a very different one. And it's kind of like the opposite end of what like a surgeon does, right? Like a surgeon makes life or death decisions and whatever with with one human, and most of the value I extracted from things like this are having to actually learn to work with people in environments that like will potentially like kill people or potentially get them seriously injured, or maimed for life or something like this. But I mean, like Sunswift's just a random group. I don't know much about it these days, or it's under UNSW. So I think what's happened now is that it's better funded, but students have less control. I don't really know a lot of the details of it. It's definitely more a mechanical electrical project, though. I really wouldn't. I think if you want to get some practical software experience, there are probably more interesting places to spend your time. Honestly, I got involved with it because of my general interest in the size of the group, and I was interested in like management stuff, which at the time, I don't think that stuff exists as much these days. I don't know a ton. But the point I was trying to make is like, you should always try and get involved in something that like really matters. Like a good example is like, join the SES or something. So when there's like storms or whatever, you do some time as a volunteer, trying to help get trees off houses that have fallen in, or like, whatever. And it's like, I know that might not sound exciting, but like I have a genuine belief that there is a terrifying amount of skill and experience and everything that comes from like just dealing with high stakes scenarios. So the more you can get involved with anything like that, generally, I think the better. Because there's a certain point where pushing code to master, like when things really matter, it brings people's best and worst out, and then you get to navigate through that. Because you can't just shrug at things as much when like, things really matter. Not like life or death, that's a bit dramatic, but like, what it's like. I mean, if you don't push code to master a lot of companies, like what's the worst thing that happens? The stock price goes down a tiny bit. Okay, I'm just going to send a poll out. I need to eat lunch. I know we've gone over, but this isn't really like compulsory lecture anyway. Go fill out the poll. Thank you for your time and patience today on talking about all of this.